Hey folks, I'm Lucy at Ballyhoo Creations, and I'm going to talk to you about eyes and noses for your puppets or plushies or dolls, whatever it is you're making. But mostly these are puppets that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to show you different kinds of eyes and noses that you can use. Some of my patterns have the instructions for these different eyes and noses. Some of these are not in my patterns, but you can embellish and switch things up. So play around, see what you like. I've just got a few sample faces here to give you some samples of what we're going to talk about, and there's lots more back here to go over, but there's a lot of options when you're doing puppet eyes and noses, and I've even got some horns here that I'll show you. So let's start with eyes, and I'll show you different small and large eyes. One of the most iconic puppet eyes would be the ping pong ball, because a lot of the Muppets and Sesame Street characters used ping pong balls in the early days for their eyes, and that's something we're very familiar with. A ping pong ball is 40 millimeters wide, and that's a big eye. That's even bigger than this one here. You might also look for things like, this is called a monster eye that I buy at Dollar Tree during the Halloween season, and these are much stronger than their ping pong balls are very cheap, easily dented at the Dollar Tree. You don't want to use those, they won't hold up well. But the monster eyes are very strong, and these are 33 millimeters, so they're smaller and a better size for a smaller puppet. You can also get these are actually beer pong balls, and these are 25 millimeters, so that gives you an idea of different sizes of ping pong balls that you can use. And all of these can be covered in fabric as well, which is how I prefer to do it, because that way you can sew them on. Here is a fabric covered one. On these monster eyes, I cut out the eyeball part because that's just my preference. And then I take a circle of fabric. And scuba is my favorite fabric to cover eyes in because it's very thick. You can't see through it, and it has a little bit of shine, but and it's also stretchy. It's a great fabric for this. So I just cut a circle and hand stitch a running stitch all the way around, put that ball in there, and then I just pull like that, and you get a fabric covered eye. You just knot that off, and then that way you can actually stitch. You can hand stitch with a ladder stitch all the way around this eyeball and get it on your puppet's face, and it won't come off. It's even washable because the plastic, the fabric, the way that it's attached is all washable. For eyes like this, for the pupils, a lot of times we will just use a felt circle, and these are the little pads that go underneath like furniture and things like that. They're little sticky pads. The stickiness on here is not permanent. I do like to use a fabric glue underneath them, but it's enough to position them and get them where you want them. And then you can go ahead and just lift one side, put a little glue under there, and then push that down, and then lift the other side, and then that way your placement stays. So that's a tip on how to do the pupils for the eyes. Felt circles for furniture is great. If you have a cutting machine like a Cricut or something like that, you can also cut little perfect circles, or you can try to hand cut, but they're not going to be perfect circles usually when you hand cut. I'm saying. And another thing that you can use is rubber balls is another option, and these are two different sizes that I've got here. You can just buy these like toy stores and party supply areas and stuff, and I like to cut these in half. You do need very strong scissors or maybe tin snips to cut this in half, but I cut those in half. And as an example, this is a sock puppet that I've done, and it uses these little rubber balls, and then it's covered. The white fabric is just a white sock. I mean, it's not even, you can see the texture of the sock there. Nothing fancy, super cheap, but it has a great look. So those are different kind of balls that you can use. There's a few other things that are often used. Plastic spoons are something that you can use to make the eye. You would cut the handle of the spoon off and then just use this part for the white of the eye. And plastic spoons come in different shapes and sizes too, so look out for that if you want to use spoons. I'm not a huge fan of this. You do have to glue these on, but it is, I mean, it's still something that you could do. You could even do the fabric covered method on this oval. That would work fine too. I have done that method on, these are Easter eggs, and this one even has bunny ears on one side, but I like these for larger puppets and plushies and things like that. I even have some pet beds that have eyes this size, and I did cover mine in the fabric so that they could be stitched on. This little bunny tail actually is a nice placement for the pupil too. That kind of works. One more example of the ball eyes. This is the larger monster eye that I showed before with the fabric covering, and they're hand stitched onto the puppet. So he is machine washable because of the way the eyes are made. And I won't get into too much detail here on the eyelids, but you can make eyelids for the ball eyes, just a half circle of fabric glued over, or taco kind of shape that you can try. There's different, I won't get into detail on how to do this, but you can do eyelids for most of the eye shapes that I'm showing here. So we've talked about balls, eggs, there's even, look for beads. If you just want little black eyes, you can find large wooden beads, different colored, different shapes of beads, balls, things like that. Let's get to buttons. This is another favorite of mine. These are fabric covered buttons, and you buy a little kit where it's in 2 pieces and it has a little rubber tool, and you choose what fabric that you want to cover the button with, and you use the little tool that comes with the kit. They're a couple of dollars for, 3 or 4 buttons. And I like these eyes because you can stitch them on with the little shank and then get the positioning of the eyes. And then, because there's nothing glued here, you can easily stitch around the edge and stitch that to your puppet's head too. And again, just felt circles on those. And I like to use those for the human puppets that I do. I like to use the button eyes for that. And that's, I believe, a 28mm button that I prefer to use on those. And then another option, and this is not anything that you would purchase, but if you do machine applique, if you have an embroidery machine, or if you have special attachments for your sewing machine, you can do an applique eye like this. It's just a circle with a satin stitch and then a satin stitch in the middle. Nothing complicated. And this is the machine embroidery pattern that I have called the Yab pattern that does this eye shape onto your puppet, and then it even stitches the seams for you. I won't get into that. You may have already seen my patterns. I have sewing and embroidery machine patterns that make puppets. And let's talk about this whole box here. I was a doll maker before I even started making puppets, so I have a lot of different options for making doll eyes. Of course, machine embroidery is a way that I like to do doll eyes. You can purchase doll eyes at the craft store in different sizes, and they usually have this little shank and the little safety latch that attaches. Here's another example here. In this, you poke a hole in the head and you just push that little stem through, and then you lock it in place with that lock washer. You can see how that works. They come in different sizes, colors, things like that. These are small blue ones. I've got some bigger yellow ones. Usually you can find them in brown. So there's a lot of different options in doll eyes. If you go on Amazon, you can find all different sizes. Even Hobby Lobby carries these froggy eyes. They have a Google eye in them. So I'm not the biggest fan of Google eyes on puppets. It looks more like a sock puppet, but you can also use a Google eye on a puppet. I mean, classic sock puppet look, right? Even Cookie Monster had googly eyes. And let's see, glass eyes and resin eyes. I will spend a bit of time talking about that because it's fascinating how these can be done. You can buy these. I've got some pairs here that I have purchased. These are made of polyurethane resin, and they have the very realistic looking iris in them, very realistic looking eyes. Or you can make your own, and there's a lot of different ways. These are little, they're called a glass cabochon, and you can buy them in different sizes. And this is just a piece of glass in this dome shape. And then you can print out, there's different sizes. You can go on Etsy and places like that where people sell graphics, and you can find all different kinds. If you are familiar with Photoshop or something like that, you can make your own eyes, and then you can glue the glass on top of the paper. So that's one option. Or you can also use resin, and believe me, I've tried it all. These are some that I designed myself, and then these are resin. This is a resin mold. I like to use the UV resin. So you have a little light, a UV light. It's a very small thing that costs, I don't know, like $7. And then you buy this resin, you put it in the mold, you put the light on it, and it hardens. And this is clear, but you can also color it, so you can make them white. You can do, you can paint in your pupils and irises. People get really fancy with this stuff. I don't. I just have played around with it. But this is an option. If you want some really unique custom eyes, you could make your own with resin and molds. So back in this little goodie box here, I've got lots of little different resin eyes. You can even purchase resin eyes. These are from the craft store. And these are like snake eyes or cat eyes or something. They're all over the place now. Other options, of course, beads. I showed wooden beads earlier. These are glass beads. You can get these in different sizes too. Sorry for all that noise. I have smaller ones. I had bigger ones, but I have used them all because I like that size a lot. And let's see, these are very interesting. I've used one over here on this example. I just found these in a thrift store. I don't even know what they were. I think they were some kind of bead because they have holes that go through them. But when I saw them, I'm like, oh, that would be a doll eye for something that I can use that. And so I bought a package of them for, I don't know, like $1. So be on the lookout for things, for, you know, weird little things like that of what could you turn into a puppet eye. I removed the little pieces of wood and put some little paper eyes in there. Let's see, what else do we have in this little box of goodies? I think that's most of the eyes, and of course you can cut your own from felt, especially if you have a Cricut or a Sizzix machine, some kind of cutting machine. You can cut nice little perfect shapes, unlike my hand cut shapes here. But that's an option too. You could either glue or stitch this onto a puppet. Some buttons, lots of button choices. These are actually fabric covered that I bought at the store on clearance. I'm like, oh, I can't pass that up. You can buy any kind of button and consider layering too. These are little wooden discs and I painted them white. And you can layer different eye types together, like put an iris on a wooden disc, or instead of a felt pupil, you could put a black button on a white disc. You could do just so many different things, different buttons that you could layer together to create eyes. Just use your imagination. If it's round or oval, or maybe not even that, you could probably turn it into an eyeball. All right, let's get all of this stuff kind of out of the way, because now let's move on to noses. And the last thing I have in the box here, you can purchase little plastic noses. And these are little bear or dog noses. And here's an example of one used on a puppet. Sorry, he's black, so it's really hard to see. But you've got the little nose right there. And he's also got some of the plastic safety eyes. Another trick that you can use, because you may not want the stems poking through the head and poking into your hand like this nose right here, you can use wire cutters to cut that stem off. And I've done that on these here. I just used a wire cutter to cut off the stem, and that way you can glue this onto the face of the puppet. I have to remember to keep showing you examples. And another example of, these are doll eyes with the stem, and the stem actually does go into the head on this one because this is a stuffed head, so it's fine. It's not hurting my hand in there. So those are the purchase, that's an easily purchased nose that you can just stick on a puppet. Very quick and simple. If you use the eyes and nose like these, it's very fast. You could also do, my very favorite form of puppet nose would be just a circle of fabric. You stitch around the edge and then you pull it tight, put some stuffing inside, and you get a ball nose. And you can kind of make them a little different sized. I've got, you know, I have a bunch that I've been playing around with, so that's some puppet noses. Like this one here is just the little ball. I have a bunch of puppet noses like that. This is actually one of my favorite methods, so I use that a lot. And you can stitch that onto the face, so again, your puppet would be machine washable when you have a fabric nose like that. If you want to get fancy, you can even put a little stitches here and pull them up at the top. Pull your thread tight up at the top to make a little nostril on your nose. So that's the fabric nose, and that's a very classic puppet nose. You can also use makeup sponges, and I have been collecting these for a while. Let's see, just between Dollar Tree and I think Walmart or someplace like that, you can get a lot of different shapes and sizes and even different colors for your noses of makeup sponge. You could either use this as it is. I like to cut a little piece off of the back so that I have a flat surface to glue on. Some of them come flat like this. Some of them, like I'm looking at this one here, that one's still closed, but that has a little flat back there, so you could use it that way. Let's see, I do have an example. Here's a little makeup sponge, and these do take paint. You can paint on these. I've used, costume paint is great for this, but any kind of latex acrylic paint will, you know, it works really well. It doesn't flake or chip off even though the sponge is spongy. That paint sticks nicely to it. And that's just an example of, this one had the little flat back, so I just put it on. Sorry again, it's a black puppet, so it's hard to see. I do a lot of Halloween decorating with puppets. And this one has a clothespin in the back. Hello! You could also cover a makeup sponge in fabric, like we did with the little ball of stuffing. And that's in a lot of my pattern instructions, how to make the little fabric ball, but you could also just cut a piece of fabric, stitch around the edge, and pull it tight around the back to cover different sponges too. You could cut your own sponge. Just get a kitchen sponge or something and use that to fill a piece of fabric. You can get more elaborate with noses. There are other puppet designers that sell patterns that have a pattern to make the nose. Maybe it's a different shape or something like that. So a lot of different options with making noses that way. I don't typically sew different shaped noses. I don't have patterns for that right now because I like these types of noses so much. I have been playing around a little bit with clay. This is a foam clay. You could use the Crayola Model Magic for this, or you could buy the foam clays that is used for cosplay. And these are really nice and lightweight, and then you can put a flat back on them so that you can glue this onto your puppet. I wouldn't stitch it because it would definitely come apart. Feels like, it's weird. It's still kind of soft and lightweight, but it's hard. And you can also, besides making noses with that, I've made some horns here. You could make teeth with this particular material, play around with different facial features with the foam clay. It's a fun thing to play around with. But if you're going to be really rough with your puppets, I wouldn't recommend this stuff because it can break. It's not as flexible as you might like, and like these horns could break off. They're pretty large. And then one more idea for a nose, you could use a pom-pom, different sizes or colors of pom-pom, and you could just put that in for the nose like that. Or another option that I use on a lot of my dolls and plushies is there's actually a pom-pom underneath the stretch fabric. And so that gives the nose where it sticks out of the face because I'm using stretch fabric. And because puppets and plushies are often made with stretchy fabrics, that's an option that you could use too. You do have to have something behind, like there's a stabilizer behind here that the little pom-pom is sitting between. You could also just use regular stuffing or fiberfill instead of a pom-pom for that type of 3D nose. So let's see, we've talked about the sponges, pom-poms, fabric circles. We've got so many different, oh, you could even put a bell on the nose. I mean, I've done it. So many different nose options. I think we've covered noses. We've covered a bunch of different eyes. There was a lot of information about eyes and noses, I'm sure. However, hopefully you got a lot of ideas and inspirations that you can then take and make your own. That's all I have for this video, but I have lots of other content on YouTube, both on this channel as well as my Ballyhoo Creations channel for machine embroidery, which also has doll and puppet content over there. So check all of those out. I'll link down in the description box so you can find more of that stuff, and I will see you later, folks.